Today's topic is finding serenity in the storm. And when I finally glanced at the topic list and put two and two together that I was the one talking about this topic, I was like, well, two things came to mind. The first thing was this image of the storm, and the second thing that came to mind was how appropriate this topic was for my life at this time. And I'll tell you all why in a minute. Let's start with the first part. Now the subheader here is, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain. And the person who quotes that is Vivian Greene, and I was like, who's Vivian Greene? Well, she turns out to be a little younger than me, and she's a singer, an R&B singer. But that statement is very true. Close your eyes for a minute, take a breath. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it is about learning to dance in the rain. We're all somewhat in our lives on unstable footing, and we all recognize, if we look deep within ourselves, there's probably a list of things that were stumblers in our lives. I want to tell you this morning a little story about the rain and the storm in my life. When I was 18 years old, just fresh out of high school, I was invited to be a part of a crew that took a wooden boat on a journey. The intent was to bring it from Massachusetts to California, from Gloucester, Massachusetts to San Diego, California. And to get there, the boat had to go through the Panama Canal, had to go all the way down the Atlantic coast, through the Caribbean, through the Panama Canal, and up the north coast, up the Pacific coast to San Diego. And so as we were voyaging, we were passing North Carolina at the time, and we had several adventures up to that point, which are for another time to talk about. But this one, we were finally making some good headway heading down the south of the Atlantic coast. And we got to play with the rigging, and she was a great big sailboat, 154 on deck, 165 feet overall. She had about 10,000 square feet of sail, 2 masts. And so the crew was had the practice to kind of shake out her sails and to see what she could do. And so we had abundant of sail canvas out, and we're still learning about where all the parts and pieces were. There was just a bunch of line everywhere. You had lots of terminology to memorize, lots of things to know, what not to do, plenty of practices going on for the crew. And I was one of the youngest ones there. So I was learning as much as I could at the time from all the other sailors. And so we were cruising along, and out in the distance was a wall of dark clouds. And it was getting kind of toward the evening time, and there was plenty to do. So it was decided to have dinner early so that we could take the sails down and prepare the boat for the turbulent weather up ahead. And we didn't really, and at that time, if you mind you, we didn't have like access to cell phones. This was in 1992. And the best we could do was Weather Facts, which was this archaic radio station that once in a while would send out a signal, and you could get this paper slowly being printed out on this little machine, and told you what the highs and lows were in your area, if you had it programmed just right. And hopefully, I can't remember if we did, but in any case, those clouds were absolutely ominous. And so we started taking down the sails, and the way that it works is the boat has to essentially stop and head into the wind so that the wind is not pressing against the sail canvas when you take it down. So to get that to release and to make it an easy work of it, the captain had to swing the boat upwind, and that meant that we were also bobbing and bouncing all around in the swell, because once you release that resistance in the sails, the boat starts to become like a cork, and you just start bobbing around, which makes it, of course, a little hard for you to stand and do all kinds of things. And it also turns out that we were in this area called the Frying Pan Shoals, which, well, that's where currents come together. So the wind and the clouds were accumulating just the right spot for us. And so as you take the sails down, you take down the head sails, and that's the front sails, and then in between, and you keep the middle sails up, and then you go back and you work on the mainsail, which is the biggest sail on this boat. And it took all the crew, of course, and we were all in our foul weather gear, and we had lashings, and we had our, gear on, our straps for our chest, so that we could clip into things as we moved about in the deck. And along comes the rain, and it starts to get darker. And the problem is the boom, and that is the part where the sail is tied to the base of the base of the sail is tied to this thing called the boom. And on this boat, it's as big as a telephone pole, and its length is about 65 feet long. And the back end of this thing is about 25 feet past the back of the stern of the boat, the back of the boat. So it hangs out over the water. And so when you want to douse the sails, when you want to take all of that down, you have to sheet in the boom, center line this thing to the boat, to the vessel, and then there's something called a crutch, which is like a little thing where the boom rests in when you're not sailing. So you're lowering the sail, and at the same time you're trying to swing this boom into the middle of this crutch, and then you're supposed to secure it, tie it all off so it can't move, and then you secure the sail as well, and with lashings. Well, this boom would not come down into the crutch. And so we were out there bobbing around. It's getting dark. Here comes the pouring rain. And I mean rain like I've never experienced it. But it was warm rain because it was coming up from the Caribbean. And it was just sheets of water. And we had to turn on the deck lights. And so there was this, floodlights from above, from the masts, shining down onto the deck while we're trying to get this work done. And it was glistening, and the rain was coming down. And as try as we might, we couldn't get this thing to sit in the crutch. And part of the reason is because one of the lines was jammed. And the line that was jammed was coming from the top of the mast to the very tip end of the boom, which is, of course, in the worst position, 20 feet over the water on the back of the boat. And the line went down to that place, and then there was this notch in the boom with a little wheel that the rope is supposed to go through or around, and then come back along the boom to the deck so we could control this line. And what that did is it allowed the boom to slowly lower into the crutch. So it has to be loose. The line had to be slack. And we could not get that thing to release because the line had jammed in between that little wheel and what they call the cheek, which is the space between the wheel and the boom. So we had to send our very best sailor out there to to deal with this thing with a crowbar and with a hammer, and it took hours. Well, it felt like hours, but it just, like, there was a real question: are we going to get this done? Are we going to be able to secure the deck? Are we going to have stability in the storm that we were actually confronted with? Eventually, finally, we worked it out, and the thing came down with a thud. And the sailor who was out there, he luckily was, had his straps together, his harness on and everything, and he had to shimmy back out. And it was just joy and jubilation, because it was like that moment had passed. Were we going to be able to be under control again? And the answer was yes. And we were able to get the sail back tied off, lashed down, and the boat swung around, and with the engines we started to make course out of the storm, headed further down the coast to the next harbor for us we were all trying to get to. But I will always remember that time, because it's like we had all that effort. All the sailors were on deck. We were sloshing around, because in this night darkening sky, the boat had to make a little bit of way to kind of get under control, but we couldn't go right into the wind. So that meant that the swell was rolling up against the side of our boat. And mind you, on good days, this boat has what would be called wet decks all the time. So the swell would kind of swell up over the deck, wash the boat, and wash off to the other side and off the gunnels. And that happened, and all the lines that were on deck were just like spaghetti everywhere, just getting washed and sloshed around. Anything that wasn't tied down was a big problem. All the hatches on the deck had to be closed at all times. And we had to be lashed practically to the lifeline with clips and harnesses, just to make sure that everything, that our bodies were not going to do something like get washed overboard. But I'm telling you this story because the vividness of it, the experience of it, was something that in those early years, when I was 18, was the very first time that I came into contact with nature in a form that that I, as a human being, could not control. And it gave me real pause, real reflection throughout the rest of my life, because there are forces that we are experiencing in this life that we cannot control. And it's a physical force like that. That's a real easy one to grasp, to understand. But there are other forces in our lives, and every life here is different. We are all meeting this moment with different life experiences under our belts. But as we come to that point in ourselves where we, in the center of ourselves, where we start to unpack these things in our lives that that are hard to make sense of. The the finding serenity in a storm is a euphemism for dealing with life's obstacles. But the catch here is that in our lives we are confronted with sometimes with hard obstacles, with hard lessons in the outward experience of our lives. And in the spiritual side of ourselves, we have to figure out what that means on our spiritual path. And when big life lessons come up to us, like the death of someone that we love, or a life-changing moment, things that are so impactful that only a pause in us, only grace allows us to kind of observe what is happening in our experience. We end up again and again at that place where how do we deal with these moments, these storms in our lives? That question is inevitably always arises to our surface of our consciousness. And those of us who are here in this room, in this meditation room, we work with life, outer life, as spiritual athletes. We practice this idea of connecting with inner consciousness, and then that brings us to a point of stillness and a point of grace where we can look at some of those hard things in our lives that approach us and that are asked to be dealt with. One of the things while I was studying I ran across for this topic was this little phrase, and it says, in Eastern spiritual practice, the highest form of spiritual practice is to observe oneself without judgment. In its essence, that is what meditation is. It gets to our core. And I wanted to sit with that for a minute. Because when I was trying to understand what all of these hard things that happen to us, what is the meaning of all this? And then listening to that, the highest form of spiritual practice is to observe oneself without judgment. It means that these things that happen to us, we have to look at them without judgment. And that is a hard thing to do. Or at least it's an unpracticed thing to do. If we think about our spiritual core, when we think about what really dwells inside of us, we know with our intuition that we come from that place of the whole, the spirit of the unmanifested whole, and that we are, in essence, an individualized piece of that whole. arising from the unmanifested into the manifested. And we, in that state of our being, right now, we experience the things that as they are not in 100% absolute harmony. The things that we experience in this life are like a part of that whole, and when it's manifested, it's the duality of it causes those things to feel separate, to be separate in our experience as we observe them looking outward. In the non-created self, the omnipresence of spirit, everything has a potential of being, but it isn't in the being until it arises into this bubble of creation, until it is separated. And the divine when the wave, when existence feels the wave, it also experiences the valley of the wave as well. And so out of that non-existence into that creation, there is that experience, that phenomenon of experiencing one thing at a time, one side of the equation at a time. And so, yes, our experience here is an experience of separation. But the thread, we must remember that we come from the whole, that the thread of spirit that animates us and all of life around us comes from spirit as a whole. And so we have to observe life. We get our consciousness into this ability that everything that we see around us, because it comes from the whole, we can learn to love it. We love the divine, and we love the divine in us, and so we learn to love the humanness in us. And we can learn to observe all those things that are hard for us, those storms, those impacts that happen to us in our lives. And we can learn to encapsulate those things with our love, because they come from the whole. They come from the thing that is everything. All the experiences in our lives, all the good experiences, all the love experiences, and all the hardships. We have to learn to encapsulate and accept that all of these things, even though they are manifested on the outside of us, at least that's how it feels, the core component of that is inside of us, and we can embrace that as a part of us, and we can say, this too, this hardship, this thing in us that tugs on our hearts is a part of us. And every time we encapsulate that with love, our love, we do the right work. Because as we start to feel that everything is inside of us as our whole, so too do we have to give all of that up as spiritual athletes in our lives. For not any one of those things really needs to have that much of a hold on us. All of those things can be given back to the Spirit. So there's this free exchange in us of observing and honoring everything that comes at us in life, embracing it all, every little aspect of it, and making room for more to come in our lives. The plasticity that we consider when we do things like mind exercises and thought exercises, that plasticity is also pertinent in our spiritual being. You have to work with the divine and the laws that govern this existence. And as we give our love and our compassion and our humility to the thing that we don't the hard thing that comes at us, we also give that love and kindness and humility to ourselves in our lives. Whenever you are still trying to bargain or reason with the reality, it is because you are still not at peace with a part of your humanity. So as we bring our humanity to the forefront of our consciousness, we realize that in that act of compassion, we become a whole human being, fully spiritual human being. So in our meditation today, as we go into meditation and we take deep breaths, and we do a check-in into our hearts, and we can feel some of those unresolved things in our hearts that are coming up to the forefront of our consciousness. Let us embrace those things Let us encapsulate them with our love. Recognize that they too are a part of us as a whole. And to release them into the spirit in preparation for the next thing on our journey. For we really are in the journey of life together. when in our hearts the acceptance of our outer circumstances and the recognition of our inner light are in the same place, we find the stillness and the peace. For truly nothing that has been created has not come from Source. And in that jubilant recognition of that fact, all the things in our lives can be accepted, can be embraced. For the hardest things that jar us bring us to that point in our lives where we surrender to the Spirit, where all of creation is accepted. And our part to play is to be in it, to experience all of it that we can. Our soul's inner commitment to Spirit in this life has been to experience what we are experiencing. And we've made pact with humanity that we are taking that on for humanity as well. No other soul can experience what we are experiencing. It is in our hands, it's in our hearts, and the recognition of that, the rejoicing of that, allows us as spirits experiencing this outer creation to have a part to play, to be in it, to be engaged, and to know your role and to know your function is part of that search in you in this life. Being at peace inside and watching your reality unfold and letting go of all expectation, that is in God's hands. What we go through in life, our life experiences, allows humanity to grow up. We are playing an important role and as we grow up, so does all that we are connected to. Let our hearts have a smile. Let us feel that love in our hearts. And let us extend that love to the things that we need to embrace, to feel whole, to feel the Spirit right there in that journey. When we find that balance, that point in ourselves of equilibrium, we see life with new eyes. Let us pray together. Kind Spirit, you who dwell within us, you who dwell in our hearts, you who have created all of existence, all around me, I embrace all of it. All within me. May my heart be open for what is to come, for it comes forth from within as expressed out here. Amen.
I still my mind, focusing on the light within, watching the sunrise in the east, in the silent garden of peace. I sit in silence, alone with you, blossoms of virtue growing in my heart. I feel so blessed. I feel your grace in the silence. still my